Welcome to the Ken
Hey, everybody.
Welcome to the Ken McElroy Show. I'm your host, Danille. I'm still recovering.
I know. She's getting better.
So I have a cough. Anyways, what's going on?
Oh, man. I went to the UFC fight this weekend. That was fun.
It wasn't UFC. It was
Bellator.
Bellator.
Yeah.
Bellator.
And by the way, we have I have Michael Chandler on today.
Later today.
He's ranked 4th in the world, so we're going to have him on a podcast. He's a real estate investor. So anyway, this is going to be cool.
For those that don't know him, though, he's like a UFC fighter.
Yeah. Yep. Bellator champion, UFC fighter. So he's going to, we're interviewing him later today. So it's an exciting day.
The fight was fun, though. It was kind of different to go to not a UFC, but a MMA fight.
MMA, yeah. It was good. It was fun. I went to the ASU Oregon State wrestling match and saw a lot of the guys that were fighting that night, plus Henry Cejudo, who was a gold medalist. Arizona State has a good wrestling program. So I took my son yesterday. That was fun. So, to me, it was a guys' weekend.
And we also went to Barrett-Jackson.
Oh, that's true, too. Yeah, didn't buy any cars for this. I'm trying to get rid of them.
Yes, you are. So we have, actually, to start, make sure you hit the like button because that really helps us out. And then we are doing a Airbnb webinar on February 23rd. We're going to talk to 2 girls that do Airbnbs, and they're going to tell you how to start, how to market it, what they do.
That's a good one. This is going to be a good one.
Yeah, if you want to look into the Airbnb thing, it's a great way to do it.
Especially with prices. We're talking about raising interest rates. So, Airbnb, we're also seeing rising rents. So this could be a strategy moving forward for real estate investors.
Yeah. If you have a rent-controlled area, Airbnb might be a great option for you.
Be.
So it's kenmcroy.com/webinar. I don't know if it's updated yet, so just go ahead and sign up, but it will be transferred to the Airbnb one if it's not already that one. All right. So today we're going to be chatting about
the big
Fed and
question mark, the rates, the Fed. What are they going to do?
Yeah, it's interesting because they're in a weird spot because they have to decide between the economy and inflation.
It's really, I'll tell you, I had a nice chat with George Gammon. George, we went to the fight together. And also I had a Zoom with him last night with our collective group, which is, the mastermind that we do. If you guys are interested in that, just reach out. But we do four events a year. But last night we had a Zoom call with George and the collective, all the members. And it was interesting because George said, focus on midterm elections. I thought that was really interesting because I think a lot of times, and we're going to talk about interest rates and all that, but I think midterm elections have a lot to do with what's going to happen between now and November. A lot. And so here we are. As of right now, the Fed's saying that on the 15th or the 16th of March, they're going to raise rates. That's what they're saying at the moment, right? Mm-hmm. So we need to just stay there for now. But the Fed meets 8 or 9 times a year. But I think what's most important is if you guys focus on this midterm election issue, which George was articulated very well. If you guys haven't watched George Gammon, you really need to go and take a look at. He's talking a lot about this stuff right now in a lot of detail. And we have this weekend we're going to be listening to Jeff Snyder live in Florida to talk about this exact thing. So we're trying to learn too. But one of the things that's happening is, as you guys know, the midterm elections have mostly to do with the House of Representatives and the Senate and all the movement around those kinds of things. And, of course, who has control during that time. So the economy is going to need to be in, call it a stable scenario leading into those November elections. So there's going to be a lot that's going to happen.
That's what the Democrats want.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah, of course, right? So that's what I think everybody should want, regardless. Obviously, everybody wants a stable economy. So I think, yes, if it's not, of course, it's
going to impact that.
Yeah, it'll impact Democrats. But the issue is that they want things to be stabilized. And the real big issue, I think, one of them is there's 2 big things to consider. One is the impact on the stock market, which is where most people have their wealth, and the real estate market. Those are the two things that could be impacted. Obviously, there's probably more things that I'm missing, but those are two big ones that are going to be impacted with rising rates, right?
Yeah, perhaps.
Well, how could they not? How could the stock market not be impacted?
Well, the stock market
How could
will
the
be.
real estate market not be impacted?
Well, I don't know. I mean, if there's such a supply and demand issue and rates go up, I still think people are going to be buying houses.
Well, yeah. I mean, we're at historical low prices, but I think
You mean it's historical low supply?
I'm sorry, low prices of debt.
Mm-hmm.
We're historical low prices of debt, and the issue, of course, is we've got call it 6-7% inflation when you can borrow at 3.5-4%. And one of the things I brought up last night in our call during the collective call was, think of it from the lender's standpoint. Like, if you were a lender, would you lend and fix rates at 4 with inflation at 7? So you have to think about all sides of the equation.
But that's what they're doing right now.
They are. This is my point. It's not necessarily good. If you're a borrower, and you guys should be listening, all the stuff that we've been talking about, you need to fix your interest rates now, because the Fed has done everything that they can to tell you that they're raising rates. But
I have a question. So you kind of went back to the banks. So the banks, you're saying they're not making money because they're fixing the rates so low?
I didn't say they weren't making money.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm saying is that they're if somebody's fixing rates and inflation is running 7, then you're borrowing. It's almost free money.
Yeah, no, it's great for the
negative,
borrower.
That's my point.
Yeah.
So it's not. How about for the lender? Let's move to that.
Right. So are they
about.
allowed to dictate their rates?
The banks?
Yeah.
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah. Just
so
like
they could raise them because
sure.
it doesn't have to be
well,
tied to the Fed.
that's what the Fed's doing. That's what the whole. That's what we're talking about.
Well,
today.
that's the Fed, though. I mean, is that the Fed and the bank?
Yeah, but the federal fund rate is the interbanking fund, is the rate between the banks. So I think that the real issue is going to be everything's going to be less affordable.
Right. So let's break it down, because not everybody understands interest rates and how they work and how they impact the economy and all that stuff. So so when rates are high, it slows down an economy. That's the technical part that's always traditionally happened.
Well, there's two things I think that get impacted. One is, like if you're going to buy a $400,000 house and let's say your interest rate's 4%, then that rate, that the monthly payment is about $1,900. Let's just say, if it goes up, then that monthly payment goes up. That's all. So what happens is the investment performance, and the values traditionally go down because of interest rates going up. So one of the things that we just benefited from for all your real estate investors is part of the reason why the economy has been so hot is because rates have ticked down.
Yes.
And so prices have gone up, but rates have ticked down. So let's go back and look at the last, let's say, 5 years. That's important to remember. So in other words, you can afford to buy more home, buy more commercial real estate at higher prices because your mortgage payment is going down with the lower rates going down.
Right.
So so you're measuring toward the investment performance, and commercial real estate and single family residential real estate is going to be impacted very differently if you're a homeowner or you're an investor, or you're a commercial real estate investor, right? They're all very different.
Right. And it also, when they raise those rates, it also impacts the economy, because it just in general, it slows buying down, it slows stock growth, which slows extra money to be put into the economy. And that can also slow jobs, right?
Absolutely. At a time where things are not necessarily, there isn't job growth. That one of the things that the Fed came out and said is that they had, a healthy labor market, which is an interesting spin. I was like, what does that even mean? I mean, in a lot of ways, we're in a wage price spiral
Right.
As you guys know, like if you're an employer trying to hire people, wages are going up.
Yeah, rapidly.
Yeah, they are. So that's going to make its way to wherever.
Well,
so,
to your products, I mean, it already is. I'm seeing it in everything that I buy.
Yeah, and I don't know about you guys, but I don't see an end in sight, at least in the next 6 months before the midterm elections, for the supply chain issues.
Well, right. And so that's kind of the issue is that will raising interest rates even positively affect anything as far as inflation goes? Because you're still having supply chain issues in the market and you're still having housing shortages. So there's supply and demand, and then there's interest rates. Well,
it's a really good
you
point.
could fix interest rates, but if you don't fix supply and demand, I don't know if it matters.
What it does is it lowers consumption and investment. That's what rising rates do. Lowers consumption and investment. So consumption, or GDP, or gross domestic product, that's part of personal consumption is part of that. So, and I think that as these rates go up, and hopefully if you go back to 2015, they which is the last time they raised rates, they raised it by a quarter point. Let's just say, just go back and Google it, you'll see. So they're not going to raise it a lot, but just a little bit of raise, it affects everything. So if the Fed meets, I think 8 or 9 times, I can't remember exactly, but they potentially, if they keep doing this, they could be, and it's going to be a test. Yeah. They need to slow down inflation.
Well, Octavia said that, he thinks they're going to do it because they said they were. So they can't just talk the talk and not do it. Yep,
that's true. I agree with them, actually. So I wasn't sure until they came out this last week and said that they were. And they keep saying it. They said they're going to stop buying bonds, and all that.
Right.
But they just keep kicking the can down the road on those kinds of things. But don't forget, the Fed has a policy. Maybe it's a policy, at least an understanding or a statement or whatever you want to call it, that they try to keep interest or inflation at 2%.
Right.
That's what they've been trying to do, and for the last 10 years, for a lot of you, they have done it. But now it's obviously it's gotten a lot worse. But they also said that they have a stable labor market, which I don't agree with.
Yeah, because people keep moving, job hopping.
Well, stable to me, you got to take a look at how they're reporting the labor, unemployment and people that can work and all those kinds of things, and there's a lot of people right now that. Let's put it this way: there's a lot more people unemployed than there are that want to work. A lot of people just don't want to work right now.
Yeah, or they've picked up picked up something
for whatever reason. Yeah. And I'm not being judgmental. It just is what it is. And so there's a lot of people with labor shortage signs out. There's a lot of people trying to offer incentives and bonuses and things to get people to work, and prices for labor is going up. Period. It just is in almost every case, right? Certainly is happening in my company. It's happening in most of my friends' companies that own businesses, and there's a big adjustment for wage, and by the way, they need it. Like if traditionally, let's say you got a 3% increase, with a 2% inflation, it was probably okay. It's not that case anymore. So employees are going backwards, and it's not good. It's not good to get a 3% raise and have 7% inflation.
Right.
So employers don't want that.
Right.
So let's just put it this way: if you have 6 or 7% inflation, that means that labor or wages really need to be several points above that.
Yeah.
So that's how the math works. So you can get upset all you want, guys, but that's a fact. If you're giving somebody a $1 increase and the cost of living is going up too, then they're going backwards. So these are things that employees, as they start to buy gas, they start to buy food, they start to pay for rent, And I know all these things operate independently, but things are going up.
Well, it's interesting. Billy has a good comment. So last week we had somebody on from Australia in the comments, and he was saying in Australia you can only get a 5-year fixed loan. After that, it resets to variable. So Billy was asking, do you foresee a time where banks will not offer fixed loans anymore and it will only be variable?
Yeah. It's a heck of a point that I've done a lot of work in Canada, same kind of thing as Australia. What happens is banks will price. You'll start to see what you guys will start to see is you'll start to see better interest rates for adjustables than fixed. So let's just look at the different kinds of products. So obviously, if you're sitting there, you're going to try to hedge it. So if rates are a lot less for adjustable, then the bank has a scenario where you can they've got you and they can manipulate the rate based on the loan documents. Mm-hmm. So not maybe manipulate is not the right word, but adjust the rates based on the loan documents. So that's when you start to see the pricing change. So again, it's just money, guys, and it's priced the way it's priced. And so an adjustable rate might be priced differently than a fixed rate, and I think you'll start to see that switch.
So it's interesting. So when you have a adjustable rate, whether it's credit cards, home equity lines, all that stuff, your payments go up, right? Because your variable rate's based on prime and it goes up. So this is what happened in 2008 where everyone had the balloon loans, right? And that's where everyone's rate changed, everything came crashing down, all of that. We don't really have that as much this time. It's more stable loans, it's more fixed rate debt. But do you see, I feel like a lot of people buying homes now are investors, and especially if the stock market starts to become more unstable, I think you'll have more people coming from stocks over to real estate. So won't that affect the supply demand issue too, even if they raise rates, because rents are also going up. So as an investor, it's like, we just bought that home, we can get $3,000 a month for it. Well, that's going to change how much I'm willing to spend on a home based on the rental rates. So don't you think that that's going to...
Well, I think that there's a lot of people that are sitting in this, the majority of the wealth is by a long shot in the stock market.
Yeah.
So, I think of my own family. I have my own family. You work their butts off and give their money to a wealth manager or financial planner, and then they they don't own any real estate other than their primary home. That is most people. So we're actually talking to a different group here, which are primarily real estate investors. And in a lot of cases, I know a lot of real estate investors that aren't in the stock market at all. And, I'm in it a little bit, but back in the day when I first got out of school, that's where all my money was before I started to understand real estate. I turned my money over to a financial planner, just like a lot of people do. And it's sitting there in a stock portfolio of something, creating fees that are not necessarily transparent. And for me, at least, my balance never changed for years. I was like, man, I just keep putting money in here. So it's like my principal balance didn't change that much. Now, I think people in the stock markets have had a pretty good run as of late. It's possible, to answer your question, that people now start to consider real estate, but real estate's hot too. And so you got rising prices and you've got rising interest rates and you're in the stock market, you might not look at real estate favorably. And don't forget that these financial planners and wealth managers, they do their damnedest to not let you move that money.
Yeah.
So, we have a lot of, in our company, we have a lot of people that move money into it's called a self-directed IRA, let's call it, or self-directed plan. So just go look on the internet. There's a ton of them. And so essentially what it means is that you're moving your money from somebody, like a wealth manager. Let's say you want to invest a couple $100,000. So you actually have to call your wealth manager. It's not easy. They don't want to lose that money because they get fees on it, to move it to what's called self-directed. And then from there you can invest. Now, there's obviously other ways. You can cash out your real estate. You don't have to do it that way. But as firsthand witness, I see these people that want to invest in our deals that have money sitting over with in some kind of a plan somewhere, and it's like pulling teeth to try to get their money and move it over into these self-directed plans. So there's a big wall between real estate investing and the stock market, and because most of it's managed money. Most people aren't managing their own money. Most people are. So so you actually have to take control of your own cash, move it over the way you want. And
well, Blackstone and stuff is doing a lot of real estate buying now on even single family rentals, I've heard, and then definitely portfolios. So I was just thinking maybe people would be more interested in more investors would be more interested in that kind of real estate.
Well, yeah, I mean the thing is they might not even know.
Yeah,
that's the funny part.
Like where their money's going.
Yeah, like if you might be in a Blackstone fund and you don't even know. So Blackstone, the way it works is, think about this: your employer, scoops some money from your paycheck, and it goes into an account, and it's managed, and a lot of that money gets allocated. You might not even know if you're in a Blackstone fund or not, right. And they're doing it for a very different reason, because what they've done is they've aggregated all this stock market money, because that's what it is. It's money that's that's managed with financial planners and wealth managers, and they're investing it for you. So you may or may not even know. But it's very different what we're talking about. What we're talking about here is, if I get some cash, I invest it directly, I control directly, I get the income directly, and I get all the tax benefits directly. It's very different if you're putting your money into some fund and Blackstone is investing it for you. There's fees all over the place, from Blackstone to maybe even the intermediators and even the fund manager that you invested with.
Okay, so to just get back to the interest rates. So so in your opinion, if they do raise rates, how much do you think it'll impact the real estate market?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
I don't know how much, but it for sure will impact it. There's so many things, guys, that and a lot of you might be going, we still need homes and there's still a big demand. And you're right, but you got to think of real estate, all of it. So think of the commercial tenant that is trying to renew their lease, as an example, and the CPI is going way up, and the landlord now has a higher burn rate on their debt. Think of the syndicator that just bought something a year ago and has an adjustable rate, and their entire strategy is based on that rate. Think of that. Think of anybody that bought anything in the last 3 or 4 years that has let's say their payment is $100,000 a month. It's now going up. Period.
Well, not if they would have listened to our show and known you shouldn't have done adjustable rate debt.
You got to think of all those kinds of things. Now, it's possible that rents have gone up past that and it's covered. I get that. But the point is that the cost of borrowing, the actual payment, is going to go up. Therefore, the values and the investment performance typically goes down, especially on fixed rate commercial office, fixed rate retail, let's say. So think of a
So why fixed rate retail?
Okay, so think about I'm talking about rents. So think about Walgreens, a standalone Walgreens. I have a friend that owns a bunch of these. Let's just say that Walgreens pays him $20,000 a month. Period. Okay, that's the number. That's his rent number. Now, I don't want to get into the types of leases that Walgreens doing, because there's all kinds of different kinds of leases. But let's just say that the rent's $20,000 a month. If my friend's mortgage rate goes up, his investment performance goes down because Walgreens' rent is not going up. That's the point. So think of long-term rents. that are fixed, and they have small little escalated clauses. Somebody that's signed a 10-year deal, they know what their rent's going to be for the next 10 years. If the landlord has a variable rate, and his or her mortgage payment is going up, then the investment performance is going down. If utilities are going up and capital expenses are going up and labor's going up and mortgage rates are going up and all that kind of stuff, and you have fixed rent, that means the investment performance is going down. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay, so most of our listeners invest mainly in single family, I would guess, or small multifamily. So if the rents or the rates go up, do you see prices going down?
Well, they could. Again, it's everybody wants this global answer. Are the U.S. prices going down? I don't think you could see some slowdown. What happens is this: people that were maybe just stretching to be able to buy something now have to buy something less. They can't pay as much. So that's how. So you guys got to remember, the bank lends on the cash flow.
Right.
Okay. Now the cost of debt is more, therefore your cash flow, your investment performance is less. So you're going to have to pay less. In a market that needs a lot of housing and is severely undersupplied and there's a lot of people, it might not slow down.
Right.
But there are a number of scenarios that interest rates will affect.
Okay. Because, I just feel like whenever we bid against homes in Scottsdale, it's always all cash buyers. And, it just seems like it's more of an investor market. Than
let's talk about that.
A single family.
All cash buyers are, they use somebody else's money. They use the hard money. We had a hard money guy on recently, you know. And they have to pay somebody money, and they're borrowing money. So, these are, this is all OPM or other people's money. If their cost to borrow from someone is higher, it's going to be higher for you. That's all I'm saying. And so your returns, the investment performance, is going to go down.
So everyone on the YouTube comments, I see some people thinking the Fed's going to raise rates and other people thinking they're just bluffing. I'm interested to know what you think. So go ahead and just let us know in the comment section. It's just going to be interesting, right? See what they do in March, right?
Well, obviously, you guys know what they're trying to avoid is a recession.
Yeah.
Right. That's one of the things.
Hyperinflation and recession.
Potentially, yeah. I one of the things that George said to me the other day that I had to wrap my head around is that you can have inflation and or deflation during a recession. I was like, okay. So, and it's possible. I actually went and looked it up last night and this morning to prepare for this a little bit. You definitely can have rising prices in a declining, in economic activities declining. So there's a lot of scenarios that can happen. The big thing to watch, I still think, and George said, and I agree with, is these midterm elections. The economy needs to be somewhat stable. Inflation is going to need to come down, guys. It's going to have to come down, and well before. And everybody thinks that this will do it, or at least it'll be something that might help do it. But I still think that we have a supply issue. You said it earlier. We have a housing supply issue that's not going away. We have a supply chain issues that's not going away, and we have wage issues that's not going away, certainly before the November elections. So it's going to be grab your popcorn, sit back in your seat, and watch this happen, guys. It's going to be kind of interesting, and you should not get too stressed about all this. Like, these are like, if there's like a tap on your shoulder, like, hello, like the Fed's going to raise rates on March 15th or March 16th. If you guys don't like take action somehow, that's on you. And that's all we're trying to do here is we still are going to have some variable debt personally, because we have some bridge debt on some value adds that we have. And so we talked about this last week. I said, what happens if the Fed raises rates by a half a point to 1 point next year or this year? Let's say. What happens if our 4% rate goes to 5%? What does that mean financially to the deal? And it could happen as they raise rates.
Yes. All right. A couple things. Eli said he thinks we're going till there's no rubber left on the tires, which I love that comment. Monica said she has a property in LA County and their moratorium was extended until 2023.
I'm so sorry. Jeez.
She said, what are your thoughts on selling? And it's like, this is why you want to really be in a landlord-friendly state, which California is not.
So, excuse me, this is the other side of it. I mean, imagine this. We have moratoriums and rent caps coming out right now. And this is not necessarily an inflation topic, but you need to be thinking about this. If you put a bunch of money together, or you just put your own money into something that's a value add component, doesn't really matter what it is. And let's just say that you believe that you can raise rents $100 a month or $200 a month, and some municipality says, "Hey, we're gonna extend this moratorium, and or we're going to issue a rent cap, like they did in Minnesota and St. Paul at 3%. If you just go look, 3% rent cap on rents was passed on November 2nd. Okay, so if you're trying to do a value add there, your value add days are gone. And so, you have that, plus you have your moratorium. You guys really need to be thinking about where you're investing, where you're putting your money. Because as these different governments and political bodies, and we have it going on in Tucson and Phoenix here in our home state, they're different city councils, different issues, and you have different stuff happening. And so if they're going to cap rent and you have a value add strategy, all of a sudden your business plan is changed because, the city's passed something in the middle of so if you have a 2 or 3 year, let's say, value add strategy on something and they pass a rent cap, you're not going to hit your numbers, period. And you're being squeezed by inflation and you have let's say a variable rate on your loan, then the cost of your mortgage payment is going to go up. You're being capped on your rent. You're getting squeezed. The investment performance on that deal is going to be bad. And that is the potential. That's the worst case scenario. But these are things that are actually happening that you guys need to pay attention to.
Yes, exactly.
What else?
So, well, I want everyone to hit the like button. Really helps us out. Slam that like button. It makes us able to produce this content. Secondly, I want to go back over on the 23rd of February. We're going to be doing an Airbnb webinar, bringing in 2 girls that have multiple Airbnbs. They manage them for other people. They're going to tell you how to get started, how to make money, things you shouldn't do. Anybody that is interested in doing an Airbnb with their property needs to listen. Even they do some of these individual rooms as well and not the whole unit. So if you have anything like that and you want to stay tuned, kenmcroy.com/webinar. I don't know if it's updated, the landing page. So if it's still on the budgeting webinar, that's fine. Go ahead and sign up. It'll roll over into the Airbnb webinar. All right. So let's get into our premium questions. So Russ, this is a good question. He said, Ken, you mentioned on one of your podcasts that you hold your properties in an LLC that roll up into a main entity. It was a quick comment, and I'm not sure I got all the details, but I was wondering how that works.
Yeah, so it's a good question. So it depends on the asset that we actually have. So if you're just owning a home, then, again, let's talk about asset protection and LLCs and what they're for. So let's first start there. Let's say you rent something and you have a tenant in there and, God forbid there's a fire and they get hurt. So, they're going to probably engage an attorney and, hopefully it doesn't really matter whose fault it was. But the point is these things happen. So they're going to engage an attorney, and that attorney is going to sue the person that they pay rent to. So if they're paying rent to a corporation or an LLC or an S corp or then they have to what's called pierce the corporate veil. So if it's in your name, they sue you personally. Very different. So if they're suing you personally and you have all these other assets sitting personally, you own all these personal assets in your name, then they now have access to all of those things. So that, again, is why you have an LLC. And so what we do a lot of times is we actually have multiple LLCs. So as we start to bring in other, let's say there's a traditional GP, LP, or general partner or limited partner type scenario that you would do when you're raising capital. So how that works is you have a GP piece over here. That general partner oversees the whole partnership. And traditionally, the LPs that sit over here come in. That's where all the money comes in. So let's say you've got $1 million of cash sitting over in the LP. So, and you raised $100,000 from 10 people. So that 1 million represents 10 people's 100,000 each. So there's an LP GP split. And so you might have two LLCs there is kind of my point. And then the property might be another LLC. So let's say property A is the LLC. Underneath it is a GP LLC and an LP LLC. And they roll up into the property. And then you have what's called waterfalls and things like that as the money comes in the top and it trickles down. And so that's probably what I was talking about. I can't remember exactly the comment, but that's one example of how you might have a couple LLCs underneath another LLC. As a GP has its own, the LPs have their own, and then, of course, the property has its own.
Yeah, and then on a lower level, too, you can have, like, a holding company, right? So, like, I know that, like, my properties are in an LLC, which are in a holding company, which are in a different state. But the best way to do it is, like, Mauricio Rawld's great for that. If you guys need somebody, he's our, syndication attorney, and he just knows exactly what to do and how to align it, so you are best protected, and it's best to just pay someone to do it. It's not that expensive.
He's one of our advisors, as you guys know. If you haven't watched his videos, take a look. And he can set all this up for you. And the really what happens is there's a lot of, even in the LP side, let's say we have an LP LLC, we might have those 10 people might have 10 LLPs. So I know it gets super complicated, but you might have 10 LLPs or LLCs, that come into the LLC on the LP side. So and again, this is all about asset protection.
Yeah, it's more of a Mauricio question. And, Shane on YouTube had a good point. You want to go with some, just not any attorney, but an attorney that understands this.
Yeah.
I had an attorney put something together for me before Mauricio, and it was all screwed up, and it wasn't right, and the properties were in my name, even though they were in a LLC, and it was just a mess. So make sure you just hire someone that knows what they're doing.
And this is an asset protection issue, guys. I just want to point that out. That's what this is for.
Yep. So our next question is from Gene. So this is an interesting one. So I like this one. So he's having a tenant issue in one of his properties. It's a 4-unit residential upstairs and 2 commercial downstairs. One of the businesses downstairs has complained of a marijuana smell in their space. The complaining business owner wants to buy an air purifier that's supposed to take care of the smell and wants us to pay for half of it. Should we do it? And does that put any liability on us?
I would just do it. Listen, it's a win-win. I don't know how much it is. It can't be that much, but it's this is going to boil down to what's legal in the state and what's in the agreements. So those are the things. I don't know where Gene is, but these are tenant issues that come up. It sounds to me like they've given a solution.
Yep.
And
it's a fair solution.
It's a fair solution. I'll pay half, you pay half. It's something that if it doesn't work, it was their solution. And I think that I would just in a heartbeat just do that because the solution came from them. The harder issue becomes when they just complain.
Right.
And they don't have a solution.
Right.
And then you keep offering them, and then they start getting into rent reduction, and they start getting into, I want to move, and all this other stuff. And then you have to deal with the tenants up above. This is a nice little buttoned up solution that came from them. I would pay it in a heartbeat.
Yep, definitely. And I've had that before too, where, I had tenants complaining that their stove wasn't calibrating to the correct temperature. And it took them 12 minutes to bake their cookies instead of 8. And I bought them a simple thermometer that goes on top of the stove, and they were just thrilled, right? So sometimes you just have to meet somebody in the middle. I mean, it's a reasonable solution. If not, you're just going to keep getting complaints about it. If they still complain after you've tried to do something, it doesn't really put any liability on you to, say that it was their solution and you were just trying to.
I'll just tell you one thing, that as a management company, what we do, and I'll talk a lot about this, but this is important. We actually let our on-site managers, I allow them $1,000 per issue to handle tenant issues. Literally, it's their discretion, because these are retention issues. These are people paying you money. So and by the way, it's never been abused. So we just know that there's going to be tenant issues, and we got to solve them, and it's going to cost some money. And so we have allowed our on-site managers, literally, if they say, I've got this issue and it's under $1,000, they could say, I'll take care of it for you. It doesn't really matter what it is. It could be a parking issue. It could be a kid issue. It could be a gym issue. It could be a neighbor issue.
Just
work with them and just know that it's a cheap solution,
and they'll feel good you're working with
especially them. That they offered half.
So Chad wants to know, what are the risks of buying a single family home in a community that is 100% rental properties compared to a community that's mostly owner occupied?
So, okay, this is really, really insightful. Good question. So if you are owning a home inside of let's say a rent to own community, and everything's rented, what you now have is a lot of competition. So that's the main thing. So if you probably have other types of houses that are in that neighborhood, that let's say you want to rent yours for $2,000 a month, and somebody, 4 doors down with the same floor plan is $1,800. That's the issue you're going to have. So you potentially could have some caps on. You have a interesting market of people that are renting things, similarly, and so the market moves the way the market moves, and people own what they own, and they rent what they want to rent it for. So that's that. In an owner occupied, you're going to have less of that, because now you're going to have all these homeowners, and you're going to own one in there, and maybe there's 1 or 2 or 3 that are rented. You're probably going to be able to command on the income side something a little bit different, because maybe there just aren't that many rentals. So it's just literally a supply and demand issue. But I've been in this situation. I've actually bought entire apartment properties. I remember we bought one in Oklahoma City. It was 276 units, and the developer had built 3 other big projects in this general half a mile area. So he had back in the 80s, he had bought all this land, and he built the exact same product. Now, A.G. Spanos, who owns the Chargers, did this back in the day. He had a 70s product, 80s product, 90s product, 2000 product. So this is not uncommon for developers to do. And so you might have an exact property, same clubhouse, same floor plans, right next to you. And all of a sudden, what happened after we bought it is we were like, okay, why can't we raise rents on our 2 bedrooms? It's because, 1 block away, there's the exact same floor plan, exact same property, just a different name, renting them for less. And so you do have that competition issue.
Yeah. So, and when I also think too, when you have a rental area, sometimes it's a little more transient. You might have a little bit more issues. When with homeowners, it's a little more stable.
Perhaps, yeah. Obviously, something that's collectively managed is better. But you just had this scenario. We had a rental. You do that you had it at one price, and all of a sudden 2 came up in the same neighborhood for less.
Yeah. We are trying to rent something for a higher amount, and some rental or management company just rented it for about $600 less a month. So we have to wait till those couple are rented before somebody's going to look at ours.
That's
right?
the issue you have if you're competing against other people.
So D from Premium. First of all, if you're watching, slam the like button for us. Really want to get over 300. We should be able to because there's 800 people watching right now. All right. So D from Premium is asking, is there a way to hedge against rent control other than buying in cities that don't have it?
I don't know a way. So I wish, it's
Well, pricing your rents correctly is important.
Yeah, but what I think the question is there a way to hedge against rent control?
Yeah.
If there's already rent control there, I don't believe there is. It is a policy you have to follow, and so I have friends that are in Oregon, and I used to own a lot of stuff in Oregon. I just sold my last deal in Portland about a year ago because of everything that was happening there. It's really, really nuts. But my friend said, hey, I've got my property taxes are going up a lot, my expenses are going up a lot, and my rent is capped. And, it's horrible. I have friends in New York talking about this. I have friends in California talking about this. I have friends in Oregon talking about this. And they're saying, my expenses are going up way more than my income, and the government's capping my income. So I'm gonna move my money. A lot of this is why these markets are on fire, guys. So people, if you look at the 1031 money that is rolling out of California and Seattle and Washington and Oregon, it's crazy. I'm talking about mostly on the commercial, but I'm sure it's happening on these one-off small ones too. People, just look at the math.
Yeah.
They don't have the freedom that they used to have to be able to run the properties the way they want to run.
So Michael is asking from Premium. The buzz in South Florida is all about the next wave of short sales and bank foreclosures. The last time we had a crash, it started with a hurricane. Do you think the banks are holding shadow inventory, and what could trigger this market turn they're predicting?
Oh, yeah, I saw a little bit about that. I don't see it personally. There's a bunch of questions in there. One is the hurricane. I've been through a couple. They're rough, man. All a hurricane does, though, is take inventory away. It helps. It's the opposite of what you think. Like I had a property, 300 plus unit on the Gulf, just outside of Houston, in a town called Baytown, and I lost. It was, let's just say, it was 300 units. My maintenance guy took a picture. He said, I swam to the units, and he took a photo, literally. And luckily, no one was hurt. These hurricanes, they evacuate everyone. But I flew down there right after, and we lost 150 units, I think, almost half the property. Hurricanes have tornadoes, and which I didn't realize, and went right through our project. And so it took a couple years to rebuild. The point is, it took inventory away.
Right.
And so that hurt the supply because after everything kind of settles out and there are properties that are severely damaged that are unrentable. And so that's not necessarily good. It actually will probably drive rents and demand up. On the other side of that, I don't think banks are holding shadow inventory. Banks don't hold real estate. They're not in the business.
They don't want to.
They don't want to. They're not in the real estate business. They lend on it. So I don't see that happening. I read that the other day too, so I understand what he's saying, but I don't know why
they would be holding it.
Well, just the foreclosure and the short sales. Yeah. I don't think we're at that point yet.
I don't think so either. No, there's too much demand,
yeah.
Especially in Florida.
Yeah.
So John's going to get a little bit of heat here on Premium.
Ooh.
So he has a question. He needs a clarification on rent caps. All right. He said, you've mentioned numerous times that you won't invest in states like Oregon and California, which you just did a second ago, because they have rent caps. You've also mentioned numerous times that you don't like to gouge people on rent increases like the elderly population. This seems to be a contradiction.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Okay.
I own rental property in an area with a 5% cap. When I imagine increasing 10% or 20%, it just seems way too high for my tenants. I get it from a business standpoint of supply and demand, but I don't get it from a keeping good tenants in place standpoint. If I can keep growth steady and not hurt my tenants with additional inflation, I'm happy. And I get the impression you feel the same. So what am I missing?
That's a good question, John. And the issue is I just want it to be my choice.
Yep.
That's it. So that's all.
Yep.
If I want to have the ability to do what I want on something that I'm investing in. That's all. So I don't want the you can do whatever you like. People are.
Well, we like to do what we like. I had certain tenants, you kind of decide based on the property and what they're paying, how much you want to raise the rent.
Hey, you're right about all of that, John. We've been very sensitive around our seniors, and and they're on fixed incomes, and so Ross and I have decided not to raise those. We're looking at all our properties the same way. We're not trying to gouge anybody, but rent is growing like crazy, as you guys know, and it has nothing to do with me. And so I just want the ability to be able to do what I want to do when I want to do it.
Because it's your business.
It's my business, and I just don't want to invest in a market where a government tells me. I don't like anyone telling me what to do.
You don't like anybody telling you what to do either.
That's just the way things should be. I mean, it's
Plus, John, you're okay with your 5% rental increase right now, but what if your taxes go up, 10 or 10%?
Not if they are.
Or what if your expenses, like for your handyman and your maintenance, go up, and all of a sudden that 5% increase, you're actually like really cutting into your cash flow, and then now you're like, well, man, I'd really like to raise it like 10, 15% because all these expenses have went up, and then the government's telling you, well, you just can't.
And what if you don't have fixed rate debt?
Right.
So, your mortgage payment goes up. So those are the kinds of things, John, that I like. I just think that I should have the ability personally to be able to be in states that, and like to your point, it sounds to me like you're a great landlord.
Yeah.
And you're doing what you want to do. And that is the beauty of it.
But just because I, have raised my rents on my tenants, 15%, but they're still staying with me because it's still under market and they still know they're getting a good deal. I'm not raising my tenants to market because I feel like that's not, I don't want to do that because they're good tenants. But just because you raise it and you're still under market, that's still a great deal for them.
But your expenses have gone up.
Yeah, my expenses have gone way up.
That's the thing. To your point, Danille had an opportunity to raise one of her tenants to market, and she chose not to. But she was on our expense side. Things are going up.
Yeah,
labor's going up, landscape is going up, her insurance is going up, her taxes are going up.
Lots of things.
So things, so you just have to have the ability to do both, and as long as you, I guess, maybe if you're in a state that your expenses will never go up more than 5%, then all you're really doing is you're just covering the rise on expenses. You're not really moving forward.
Yeah, when your money's going to buy less, so then you're actually moving back.
Yep.
So it just depends what you want to do. Dan from YouTube has a good question. He said he's looking to sell. Our question's why, but he's looking to sell, and he wants to know, should he sell now before Feds raise the rates, or should he wait?
Well, you guys know my position on. I'm a long-term hold guy, so I don't like to sell things. I have, as you guys know, back when I was younger, I used to do that. I feel like sometimes when I sell, I have a lot of cash, and I don't want to be heavy in cash. So, and it's tough to find that next deal. So this is the biggest issue I find with 1031 buyers. There's not a week that goes by I don't have several come to me. I had one last week. I have $17 million. I need to roll it into a 1031. I told you guys my 96-year-old uncle. The very first thing he said when I picked him up, he's like, "I got $3 million coming out of 1031." 96. He's trying to find a way to save tax. So the moving of the money. It's nice to have the money, but the moving of the money is what's driving a lot of stuff. And so I don't think a quarter point is going to move the needle that much. I don't know your situation. I don't know how highly levered you are. I don't know what state you're in. I don't know what your expenses are doing. I don't know what rent's doing. So all of those factors have to be considered. But at the end of the day, you guys, I like to hold. I think real estate is a great hedge for where we are in inflation. If inflation goes up, let's say 7 or 8% this year, and your home is worth $300,000, it's now at 8% on $300,000 is $24,000. So your home's now worth $324,000. Right. So that's the way you have to be thinking, as opposed to sitting in cash.
So Rents Due we love that name, by the way, on YouTube, has a great question. He said, at what point do you refinance? Meaning, do you wait until it's a 6 or 7 cap, or how does that look?
So we don't really look at cap rates when we're refinancing. We look at how comfortable are we with the debt? So we work backwards. So let's say something cash flows $10,000 a month. We take a look at how much we have invested, and let's say that $10,000 a month is generating a 12% cash on cash return. We might say, let's take that down to $7,000 a month, with a higher payment by scooping some cash out refi. So you're actually reducing your investment, which is good. And then you potentially could be jacking your cash on cash return, because don't forget that cash out refi pays back original equity. So we're always looking at it that way. But we also want enough. I don't want to run it up too far so that I'm concerned about my potential cash flow on a property. And the lender's not going to lend you more than they, again, the real estate is the collateral for them, so they're gonna be looking at this the same way.
Yeah, and Chris, on top, to kind of piggyback off that, he wanted to know: do you have to show a higher rent roll before you refinance?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Good question. Yeah. So when we're refinancing, guys. So let's say I'm looking to refinance something in June. I have a strategy right now in January for that refinance. I know well in advance, and so we're pushing rates on the rents. We're looking at all the expenses. We might even reduce some of our spending on the maintenance side during that period of time, because I'm trying to maximize my net operating income, and trying to get as much as I can. So we're looking at all of those things on the income side and on the expense side as we lead up to a refinance. We don't just one day go to somebody. So it's very calculated. We know exactly what we're going to refinance for this entire year already, based on loan maturities, based on rent growth, based on all kinds of things.
Okay. And we're going to answer one more question on YouTube here in a second. Please hit the like button. We're only 42 people away from getting our 300-person goal.
Ooh, nice.
Also, check out my Airbnb webinar, kenmcelroy.com/webinar. Just go ahead and sign up. It may still be under the budget webinar, but it will sign you up for the Airbnb one, where we're going to have a couple girls that know what they're doing, help you start your Airbnb process, and it's free. Okay, last question comes from Ivan. He wants to raise rent on his tenant, and he doesn't know, does he give them a notice in writing, or is it better to mail it to them, or what is the right way to do this?
Why don't you talk about this one? Because this is something that's been an education over.
Yeah, it has. Because I was raising my rents, and I needed to know how to what to do, because I've never raised them this much. So I wanted to go about doing it the correct way. Normally I would send a text. I wouldn't recommend that. So I've kind of professionalized my way around this. So basically I sent a very nice email that was very much to the point. It was, how much the rents are going up by, letting them know they need to let me know by a specific date. I gave them 30 days to tell me what they were going to do. And then if you have any questions or anything, please get a hold of me at this contact information. And I emailed it to my tenants, and they all responded. If they don't respond, you can't just assume that they got it. So then you might have to try other ways, like texting them, hey, did you get the email I sent? Or stopping over there, or whatever you need to do. But you need some kind of confirmation that they got the email that you sent. And I would do it digitally versus paper, because that way there's a paper trail, and you can pull it back up if they ever say that they didn't know or anything like that. So that's just the way I would handle it.
And just to add one more thing, if let's say a tenant's let's say they're going to move out April 1st. Let's say their lease expires April 1st. Danille will be working on this in January and February.
Yeah.
Way in advance.
Yeah.
So, they have the ability, the tenant has the ability to give you notice and say, I don't want to stay because the rents are too high. And you have the ability as a landlord to say, here's where the rents are, and here's where the market is. So just make sure you do it way in advance, way before the actual notification to move out period is. In our case, those are usually 30 days. Sometimes they're 60. I think you made yours 60.
Yeah, mine are 60.
So if it's 60, you want to be working with that tenant 90 days before. You want all this to happen at least 30 days before that notification period.
You need to give them time, right?
Yes.
They have to have a few weeks to sit down and say, am I going to be paying this? Am I going to be moving? What's the market like? What are my options? The last thing you want to do is rush them, because then it puts a bad taste in their mouth, and then they don't know what they're doing, and then you're stressed. So it's just better to do it ahead of time, especially if it's going to be significant.
Definitely.
And that way too. Oh, and something Leslie taught me, which I didn't know, this is a new tip for me, is as soon as they tell you they're not going to be renting there, so that's for me, that's 60 days out, because I require a 60-day notice. You get your handyman or repair guy in there right away to assess the property, so you know how many days you're going to need, which I never have done before. I always just sent him in when they had moved out, but she said, no, you do it as soon as they give notice, so that way you can take a look around, see what needs repaired, see how long it's going to take, and know what your turnaround time is going to be, and stuff that maybe you could get ordered or started to get working on before they move out if you can.
Especially now with supply chain stuff, guys.
Yes.
Like the rental we had, we actually had to buy a used refrigerator and a used washer and dryer. Now they were nice. They were only like a year old each, but
until they flooded our unit, but we'll talk about that next week.
but the truth is these are really important things that if you need to order things and you have real things that need to be done, they need to be scheduled way in advance. People are busy, and there's supply shortages on a number of levels.
And you never do know, because I just had a couple tenants move out because they bought a house, and it was exciting, and I kind of thought that they took really good care of the place, and they did, but there was more damage than I would have thought that there was going to be. So just those things, like you kind of assume, oh, this will have no damage, and then you go in and you're like, well, we probably actually do have a little bit of things we need to do in here, but you just need to make sure. If I would have sent him in earlier, I would have known that and could have got some of the things ordered.
Yeah, that's a good point.
All right. Well, we got over 300. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
And we will see you all next Monday. Don't forget to sign up for the webinar on the Airbnb. It's kenmcelroy.com/webinar.
Yeah. And if you guys have a topic that you want to hear, please send that to us, because
leave it in the comments.
Yeah, because we like to hear what you want as well. So thanks again.
Awesome.